I'm David Batulis, the author of Metabolic Topology, which is Metabolic Topology, the book, Metabolic Topology, the medical sect that's cure first medicine. Physicians are frustrated, Americans are frustrated, folks, in all the civilized world are frustrated with the lack of cures. Metabolic topology is the answer for that. Metabolic topology is the doctrine and the liturgy of cures. Metabolic is the doctrine, and topologies are the language of the liturgy. The topologies are the language of Nobel Prizes. Topologies are a very specific portion of math. I happen to be an expert in that area of math, as well as having a master's of healthcare administration from the best program in the world, as well as being a published peer-reviewed biochemist, published peer-reviewed pharmacologist. I published, Perfecting the Brand American Medicine. Published Kyrios Relativity, which corrects multiple of Albert Einstein's errors. Metabolic Topology is a medical sect that we're going to launch. It's a medical sect that not everybody knows that there were different medical sects before 1910 of the Common Era, when 103 separate shepherd traditions of good doctors, good shepherds, were summarized into just two, of which we refer to as medical doctors and osteopaths, of which are great medical sects, but they're asked to be everything to everybody. Their Hippocratic oath is being everything to everybody. That's part of why we haven't had a rate of cures that you would have expected with the amount of investment that many of you have put into healthcare and human services. And the answer is, frankly, adding a third medical sect back that's cure first medicine. Metabolic topology, where in the Hippocratic order, in the Hippocratic oath, it's cure first medicine. I elaborate on it in my book. There are 15 chapters that are predicated on the ancient tradition of chivalry, the ancient tradition of knight myths and parables. I happen to be Lithuanian. I happen, on my father's side, you'll notice my surname is Lithuanian. We are the tribe of the ancient language of knights and kings. Jagfetic is the name of that language, of which that's a language of white knights and white horses. We know because the word equos, the word for the horse, the ancient word for equos, for equity, comes from our people, comes from our tribe. It's a small tribe. It's a small tribe that lived under Soviet control from 1919 to 1991, and then spontaneously broke free. And so it happens to be incredibly important, matching your adventure as a donor to that ancient tradition of chivalry that comes from my people, of which we are not a very large proportion of the people on Earth. Lithuania itself has only about 3 million people. There's maybe an equal number of Lithuanian Americans, depending on how you measure it. But we are the origin of, we domesticated the horse. You can tell by language, because all the old words for horse originate from us. And so, looking at metabolic topology, the book one is the horse, the knight, and the energy beyond, of which those happen to include our ancient parables, which go back 50,000 years. Chapter 1 is Beyond the Calorie and King Bear. That might be your adventure if that's interesting to you. Chapter 2 is Odin's horse Sleipnir and Combined Arms. Combined Arms is so critical in understanding how to engage in a multi-front war against disease. That might be your donation if that's interesting to you. Odin is more of a Nordic myth, which derives from Jagfetic. The third chapter is Little's Law and Ectomy. Little's Law and Ectomy are about the risk of blocking and attacking again by disease on our bodies and ourselves. That is a very ripe area for cures that has not been elaborated by any other medical scientist that I'm aware. My blocking technology originates from my study of the telephone. My telephone engineering work, of which there are rules, natural law rules on how many calls can come into a circuit, how many secretaries you need answering that call. That happens to be one of my areas of expertise. It applies in queuing math with computers as well, another place that I've done work that's less concrete in explaining to folks. But Little's Lawnectomy is the third chapter. You might find that is the right place for you to make your donation. The fourth chapter is Suspect in Biotopology. My acronym Suspect is taking the country by storm. We can benefit by your donation to build institutions of Suspect and Biotopology. Because Suspect is the new Baconian method that includes both deduction and induction. So it's problem solving by data, by candor, and problem solving by deduction, by belief as well. The acronym means system, energy, unit, seconds as in time, process as in one directional and non-reversible, expectations as in human expectations, cycles as in repeatable systems, topologies as in reversible cycles. Which is really important because my metabolic topology arose out of Nobel Prize winner Hans Adolf Krebs' work on Krebs topology. And Krebs topology basically shows that human metabolism has repeatable biochemical transactions. Those are not described at the primary care level and not in physician training. It is why we need to create a new medical sect, create new institutions for metabolic topology, graduate new physicians for metabolic topology. Suspect in biopathology. So biotopology is an area of medical science that's in its infancy. The only people in that field have basically won the Nobel Prize, where they've used advanced math with biology in understanding disease. If those are appealing to you, your donation can go towards Suspect in Biotopology, featured in my fourth chapter. The fifth chapter is Don Quixote in Biochemical Blocking. Don Quixote is part of the story of how knights are not prevalent in the New World, despite having been so prevalent in the Old World. And the idea of a misanthropic anti-hero jousting at windmills and knocking down institutions that actually functioned. Knights and kings were functional, more so than we describe, is better than the body politic that we have today, because there's a higher training and an oath to something higher than themselves, and that their duty first. So biochemical blocking is returning of the knight for using biochemical blocking to strike back at disease the way that disease has stricken at us. Disease is natural. Disease behaves lawfully. Curing disease is natural and lawful. If that's interesting to you, you might donate towards our Don Quixote and Biochemical Blocking from Chapter 5. Book 2 is Metabolic Topology and T-34 tanks. The T-34 tanks were tanks that the Russians used on the Eastern Front in World War II in defeating fascism. They included an agreement with the United States, which was a land lease program. The T-34 tank was a manufacturing partnership that was actually traced back to American philanthropy. That happens to be really important because the land lease program was the program of peace between America and Russia before the Cold War. It's something worth revisiting. It happens to also be worth revisiting, for peace. It's worth revisiting in defeating disease, because the T-34 tank is the analogy of quantity is a quality all its own. Because there are things in cures where quantity is a quality all of its own. If Hitler had known that Russia and America could crank out 80,000 T-34 tanks, he never would have dared cross into Russia. Quantity is a quality all its own. That's the second book, is setting the stage of a large-scale war against disease. Having all the nations of the world cooperating together on disease cures. It happens to be incredibly important. Chapter 6 of my book is Jotine, the first and last organ. Jotine is an old Jagvedic word meaning the rider. It means the night. And Jotine is my descriptor for our mitochondria. Mitochondria you get from mom. It's the DNA that you get from mom only. Aside from the combinatorial DNA. That is a separate organ that is not specified as a separate organ, but should be and needs to be, because that is the organ that is so useful in destroying disease. Because it occurs at a cellular level. Its transactions are quantum and are able to do natural things, and in some cases, some believe even supernatural things, favorably to our bodies. And that's one of our key weapons in defeating disease. If that is interesting to you, you might make your donation to us, for Jotine, the first and last organ. The 7th chapter is conditioned tedium. Conditioned tedium is my theory that part of why Jotine, of which that's the mama organ at a cellular level, that actually kills off our cells. It is the only part of our body that kills off cells. It is the origin of disease in many cases, because it is functioning locally, where she says, basically, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. And so understanding each individual cell's, Jotine's tedium, and disgust at their surroundings is part of how we defeat disease. If that's interesting to you, you might make your donation to us in the fund Conditioned Tedium. That's sure to unlock multiple cures and multiple diseases. The 8th chapter is Conditioned Impatience. Conditioned impatience is similar to tedium but separate, where a disease state lingers around the mitochondrion, around the mama cell, that's part of us, longer than that cell can tolerate. And that is a source of multiple diseases. And we know that theory will be central to multiple cures. If that's interesting to you, you may make your donation to Conditioned Impatience. That's the Mama Jotine saying, I brought you into this world, I'm taking you out. Because she's gotten too impatient. Chapter 9 is Conditioned Desoloing. Desoloing is, again, another function at the cellular level that is central to multiple disease processes. I'm just desoloing is when you have the Mama Jotine abandon an area because of the local conditions. We know that is central to multiple disease states. You can imagine the horror of that cell, of which that cell is a living thing. Your brain doesn't have a sense of it, but for those of you that are women, Jotine is in your children. Your mitochondria live on in your children, and that there are cells that cause disease, that cause early death, that originate from abandonment, local abandonment. And you can imagine how horrible that is, that there's not a body of medical science focused on trying to eliminate cellular abandonment of her own child. And that, if that's appealing to you, you might donate to conditioned dissoloing, which comes from chapter 9 of Metabolic Topology. Chapter 10 is Sir Francis Bacon and New Atlantis, of which Sir Francis Bacon had a vision of America as a New Atlantis. That happened to be an important story for what we call America, of what we call the indispensable nation. And America is so important in the story of disease cure because being less densely populated than the old world gives us a key advantage. And there are multiple opportunities for delivering cure-first medicine in rural and suburban areas in America. Not every donor knows that there are 180 rural hospitals closed between 2006 and 2023. And very few of those were reopened in any qualitative way as a new kind of medicine. Any one of those can be reopened where the building can be named after the donor, after you, with the medical sect for Metabolic Topology Cure First Medicine. And that tradition will change the world forever for the better. Because America has taken the best from all the world, of which there were 101 traditions of good doctors, good shepherds, other than medical doctor, other than osteopath. We like medical doctors, we like osteopaths, but America, the whole wisdom of America was taking the best from all of the tribes. So if that's appealing to you, you might donate towards Sir Francis Bacon and New Atlantis. My third book is of Metabolic Topology is Ending Metabolic Disease. Chapter 11 is Sir Yvonne and Insulin Topology. Sir Yvonne is my ancestor on my mother's side. Sir Yvonne was the 5th governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was King Henry X. He passed the first religious freedom law in the New World. He founded the college, the new college, called Harvard University in 1636 while governor. He founded Rhode Island. He had a vision to manifest destiny to spread English all over America. The language persists because of Sir Henry Vaughan. Dutch was more prevalent, French was more prevalent. He also he had a vision of calculus that was a generation before Isaac Newton, of which he used the word shapeless, of which he would create a hull of a ship that was shapeless at speed. He had a vision of a ship at speed, steaming across the sea at full speed and then backed into the sail size and the sail position and backed into the size and position of the armaments using calculus. And he built the British Navy that defeated the Dutch Navy that defeated piracy, which is such an important part of the story of knights, because Sir Yvonne was one of America's knights. America had knights. They did some of our most important work in our founding. He built the British Navy that conquered all the world and defeated piracy, basically. So Sir Yvonne and insulin topology. So insulin is a topology throughout our body. It has manifolds, and it also has biochemicals. And that topology is where the cures for metabolic disease exist. And if you can use calculus to design a hull of a ship at full speed, you can design cures for diabetes at full speed that kill off metabolic disease and address many of those other issues we described. We know that the diabetes is natural, it's lawful, and therefore it's curable. It's fully preventable. And so if that's interesting to you, you might make your donation to Sir Yvonne and insulin topology. Chapter 12 is type 2 diabetes, so having a cure for type 2 diabetes. The tradition of Jamestown, of which I had an ancestor there. His name was Edward Spaulding. And there was a knight that went to Jamestown, Sir Fernando Wainman, who brought knights. He brought 8 horses to Jamestown. The Jamestown colony happened to fail. The people died of starvation. There's a horrible story where they even ate their own horses. Type 2 diabetes isn't totally dissimilar. The jotine, that organ that's within you, that's inside you, you could think of it as like a horse, although you can't hear its thoughts. It's there. Type 2 diabetes is the horse suffering within you. And that suffering is what type 2 diabetes is. And so for those of you that want to cure type 2 diabetes, you can donate to our Sir Fernando Wainman, Edward Spaulding type 2 diabetes cure to strike back, and to save the horse. Because see, the horse is actually American. The horse is actually from here. The horse is ours. Not everybody knows that hunters came over the Bering land bridge into America tens of thousands of years ago and hunted the horse to extinction. The relatives of that horse escaped out into Siberia and on down the steppes of Europe into the outstretched hand of my ancestor, Lithuanian's ancestor, the Jagfetic people's ancestor, and said, "What did they do to you, girl?" Which was the source of all chivalry. And so, we rescued the horse. That's the story of horse shepherds. That's the story of Jagfetic people. That's the story of Lithuanians. And so, the decrease in the use of horses as transportation doesn't decrease the need for knights, because we can, rescue the horse within you. We can rescue the jotine. If that's interesting to you, you might donate towards our Chapter 12, Type 2 Diabetes Cure. Chapter 13 is directionality in metabolic topology. That happens to be so important because at a cellular level, our jotine has multiple superstructures that are incredibly powerful if we feed and nurture and treat them. And I elaborate on this biochemical-based chapter. If that's interesting to you, you might make your donation to Direction Metabolic Topology. But that happens to be so important. We're talking at a cellular level at Direction and looking at the superstructures that made jotine great and how to get our jotine, our mitochondria, to perform at the next level, which is a quaternary system, which we can elaborate for donors that are interested. 5 levels of cures. The 14th chapter is nutrient demand. You might make your donation to nutrient demand if you're interested in the primary prevention process that we call public health, which includes the field of nutrition, of what people choose to eat. We know, looking back 40 years, that Americans are eating different things and are getting inferior results from what we were getting 40 years ago. And so if you're interested in the diabetes cure of nutrient demand, primary prevention, you might donate to Chapter 14, Nutrient Demand, for Metabolic Topology. Chapter 15 of Metabolic Topology is Hippocrates Beyond Medicine, because it is about creating a new medical sect and new institutions, new medical schools that are cure-first medicine, that can evangelize those. And that study, that method, is qualitatively different than medical doctor treatment and osteopath treatment. The good news is that we're not without options. There were 103 good shepherd traditions. There were 103 good doctor traditions. There are 101 other traditions other than medical doctor, other than osteopath. Our donors are interested in building new ones, of which metabolic topology is the most important one for Cure First Medicine. So make your donations to us at profi.me on the Metabolic Topology tab. Make your donation to Metabolic Topology, the medical sect, Metabolic Topology, the book, metabolic topology, the institutions, which can include investing in any one or more of those rural hospitals that closed, that were abandoned. And we can look at reopening the hospital, reopening those 103 other Good Shepherd traditions of healing, and opening up cures, cure first medicine. Join us at profi.me today.